Hello, beautiful people. It's Sandro Stefanucci from Abstract Homes and Renovations. So glad you could join us today on the podcast. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about laneways. I know that a lot of people don't really understand what laneways are. All they think, okay, you're in a home that's in the lane. But that's essentially what it is. We do have laneways, and they are in lanes. Vancouver had started laneways. I think 2009 was the first unit that was built. And it started off as a studio. And I guess, the whole purpose of the laneways is like we had all these alleys. And I mean, to some degree, there is a lot of alleys out there, but they're really in rough shape and they look kind of terrible. Cleaning up the laneways in Vancouver because they were getting pretty ratty and also another less expensive option for living accommodations, because I've seen over the 40 years that we've been doing this, I've seen a ton of people actually take over their garage and have living quarters and have their kid living in there. So I guess it really sparked the thought, well, what if we actually build something that's legal? So now we don't have some fire trap in our backyard and dilapidated thing that's, basically a terrible use of space. So I think that was, the kind of the brainchild of why laneway homes were created. And Vancouver is the first to start on that process. Now we have different municipalities. Burnaby's getting close to approving that. I think we should see one probably in the next couple of months that will get started on the laneways. There are other municipalities that are already building them. They call them something maybe like a garden suite. I know Maple Ridge does that. Coquitlam's been doing it for a while. So, again, I think that laneways are a great option for people that are on a piece of property. For one, you can get great income from a laneway. As everybody knows right now, rentals are quite pricey out there. So if you're looking for, a return on your investment, laneways are a great place to go and have built. So the characteristics and features of laneways, I guess there's really a lot. The city in Vancouver particularly likes to design that laneway. If you got a character home or something that has some character merit to it, that you're going to want to design it similar to that so it fits on the property and it looks good. And if you don't know already, if you've been down any alleys in Vancouver that have finished laneways, they actually look quite nice and it really cleans up the lane quite nicely. I love them. I think they're a great option. Great, for investing again. The economic benefits for your homeowners is that your property value increases. You actually have rental. And now I still believe that you can actually get money back on the rental from it. I know some people are doing Airbnbs on it and they're getting actually probably maybe even up as much as double what you would get for a rental on it. I hate to say that, but that is true. So you could definitely make it worthwhile as far as your mortgage payments would be on there, and you would actually make money at the end of the month. There's tons of flexibility and adaptability to laneways. And what I mean that, like, you can design it in a way that allows for somebody even just to live on the main floor. So say, you have aging parents and you want them to live beside you on the same property. You can have your bedroom downstairs, you can have your eating quarters, kitchen, bathroom, and you could quite easily live on one of these laneways. For somebody that's aging in place would be a great use for laneways. The city now, as we're speaking here, is 2023. They are in the midst of making zoning changes, and some of the changes are increasing the size of the laneways, allowing, especially if you're going to be building a new home and the laneway on there, the homes are going to be shifting a little bit towards the front of the property. So we'll have less setback on the front of the property, which allows for a greater footprint for the laneway house, which is great because, even with some of the properties, you can get up to 2,000 square feet, whereas now you're under 1,000 is the biggest you can get. So a 2,000 square foot laneway, that's a house. Like, that's not a laneway anymore. This house, it's very, very livable for a family, never mind just one or two people. Those are some of the upticks in building a laneway. So what are the downsides? I don't know if there's really any downsides to it. I think the permitting process can be a bit of a challenge. Now that the city is also talking about making the processes easier, but I don't think you'll find that with a laneway. I think it's going to be the same process. It might not get done quicker, but we'll have to see down the road if that changes or not. The biggest question I get asked is people think that they can build a laneway for $300,000. And I always kind of like, where did you get that number from? If you go on the City of Vancouver's website and you Google how much it costs to build a laneway, you will get even a Vancouver Sun article that was written years ago that says it's $300,000 to build a laneway. That's just not anywhere close to that now. The dollar, I think that's a misconception. They don't take into consideration, the permit costs, the engineering, the architecturals. They've got, okay, well, maybe the cost of the actual build, but you have all the red tape and all the soft costs that they don't include in that price. So it can vary. You can get laneways $700,000-$800,000 easy, depending on the bigger ones for sure, right? And they're more challenging to build because you are trying to get the same amount of things, if you will, your kitchen, your bathrooms, your bedrooms, everything in a smaller space. So, every inch literally makes a difference in in what you're building. So a lot of thought has to go into, more thought I think goes into a laneways than, actually building a bigger home. I think there's some steps you can take when you're considering a laneway home, as we talked about, if you're looking at for a family member to move into. And I think that's a great option when you consider a laneway home, because then you can have whoever it is with you on the property. And which a lot of people don't know is that you can have a legally binding agreement drawn up by a lawyer. There's lawyers that do this that can have, say if you have a family member that wants to actually buy the home, but the city doesn't recognize it as a separate entity, but you can enter in a legal agreement with that as being your own home. It's quite a rigorous legal agreement, but you can do that, and you can buy that and purchase that property from the property owner at that time. So some people may want to do that or consider that. Laneways and infills, like they're two different animals. Even though they may look the same, they're two different animals. The laneways, there's bylaws that would consider it a laneway, and there's different bylaws that consider a infill. So an infill is the zoning in there's areas that are allowing the infill, which is very similar to a laneway. It's in the lanes, the same thing, but the zoning is changed somewhat in reflecting of that neighborhood. So it could be RT zone instead of RS zone, and they'll let you build bigger. Like the one we did for an architect, it was 1,200 and some odd square feet over 3 levels. And typically, you get a story and a half. This is the biggest you can build for a laneway. If you want to go down underground, you can. It costs a ton of money, but you can go down there and get down lower and to get that space. But the infill allows you, because of the zoning of it, and the house that was on there had some character to it, which he retained the character of that home, which allowed him to build that bigger house on it. We had to do things like outside sprinklers because the proximity of the infill was very close. I think it was like 3.5 meters from the main house. You don't see that very often, but in that consideration, then you have to have a dry line sprinkler. So you could have stratified it, but which allows you to, as a separate entity, and sell it separately. So the ones that you're seeing that are, they do have a for sale sign on the laneway, they're infills. So you can stratify those, and they are a separate entity. The city recognizes a separate entity, where the laneways are not. So the laneways are part of that property, like they're together. It's not really it could be, obviously it's a separate unit, which it is, and you can have it rented out as a separate unit. It's not tied to the house because it is separate from the main house. But infills also are separate from the main house and look very similar to laneways, except they can be stratified, which you can't do the laneways just because of the zoning. The zoning is different in there, which allows you to build those bigger dwellings, which in turn you can stratify and sell separately, legally, recognized as a separate entity, where laneways are not. We're seeing where, adult children are actually either, it's interesting, there's one I can remember this one project where the homeowners actually moved into the laneway, and it was just the husband and wife, and then the younger son with his wife and with a child and had another child on the way, actually took over the main house. So there's lots of flexibility in those options, and it worked out perfect because they could have basically built-in babysitters, but not necessarily living with them in the house. I think it's great. I think they're a great step into allow for things like that to happen, where you have the mother or father as helping out raising the family, and be able to do it on the same property, which before you couldn't do that, and typically nobody wanted to live in the same house with their parents. Now they can do that. There are, again, challenges with building laneways and constraints and working with small spaces. So there are people that specialize more so in the design of laneways necessarily. Any architect can design it, but I think, they're very specific, and especially when you're looking at smaller spaces and being able to find storage solutions for stuff like, we've taken over parts of attic, is like we're saying, well, like, how can we utilize this space? We put cupboards in actually in the stairs going up to the second floor, where we put cupboards in the staircase on the risers. So actually you have cupboards in there so you can put all your shoes in there, things like that. So not everybody is up on, necessarily designing well-appointed laneway or infill. Yeah, laneways for us and infills, I really like doing them because they are challenging. I just find them more challenging than a standard-sized home. Again, you have the constraints of fitting and being very creative on how you put the home together to get everything you want and get to build a great product. I just like doing them because it's challenging for me, because you are trying to get a lot of stuff into a small space and doing a good job of that. I just like the challenge. Great place to get started if you're thinking about, am I building a laneway? Oh, it's actually an infill. I mean, you can get a ton of good information off the city as far as, zoning and in your zone and what it is, but to get a better, say, feasibility study done and what it is you can put on that lot and get it right down to the square foot. We have that service available, and we can do that. There's a number of other architects and so forth that can also help you out with that question, and basically getting started, figure out what it is you can do on the property, what's the size of it, the feasibility study as we call it, and we can do that. Thank you for joining us today. Great to have you. I would like you guys to follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again. Take care.